Welcome to Deloitte. Make AI make sense. Please welcome to the stage, John Footen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. So they say that the way to start off these kinds of things is to start your talk with a joke. And so if this joke is funny, I wrote it. If it's not funny, it was the AI. So here's the joke. I asked AI to write a joke for me, and it sent me my resume. I'll take credit for that. So what are we here to talk about? Well, last year we were here, and we talked about change in general. We focused on business, people, process, technological issues, all associated with change, but we did it in a generic way. Towards the end, we mentioned AI, but we didn't talk about it all the way through. But this year, we're going to focus on AI. Why? Well, it's my opinion that we've passed the peak of the hype cycle, right? It's time to really look at what's being done in our space and what is successful and not successful in deploying AI into your organization. So I'm going to start with an important framing question that's going to be part of trying to work through this question of how we make AI make sense. What is AI? Well, you can see it up here. It's not new. In fact, arguably it goes back to antiquity. I won't go through a whole philosophical debate of what is AI historically, but it certainly goes back nearly 100 years. At the same time that things like color and sound and film were rising, so was AI. And in fact, all of you in this room have been using AI your whole careers. Now, sometimes we've had different words for it. We might have called it big data. We might have called it machine learning. But it was all part of this AI ecosystem. So in the spirit of the title of this session, Making AI Make Sense, I want to reframe some of this hype that we've been hearing about what is AI so that you can think about the best ways to take advantage of it. AI is not magic. It is not some dramatic, never-seen-before technology. It is a computer program. That's what it is. It's just a computer program. It follows algorithms, it processes data, and it produces results just like any other computer program does. And thinking about it in this way, not giving it some magical characteristics, but thinking about it this way is one way that you can properly make sense of it in the face of all the hype. It is cool tech, but it is normal tech. And what that means is that it follows all the same rules that we have all learned in our careers about how to deal with tech. It will have a real-world impact akin to other techs that we have seen. And like other tech, you're going to need to do the right things to make it work for you. You're going to have the right infrastructure for it. You're going to have good data, good access to your data plane. You're going to have to do architecture. It doesn't get rid of the need to do architecture. You're going to need good UIs because human beings are going to need to be a part of it too. Every single thing that you have learned in your careers about dealing with technology is going to apply to the AI situation. The rules have not changed. You need to use AI where it makes sense. So, always keep in mind, AI doesn't think. It doesn't scheme. No matter what hype you're hearing, it doesn't reason. It doesn't do any of those things that you associate with human beings. It is a computer program. It can simulate some of those things in an imperfect way, but ultimately it is not doing those things. It is running a program. Always remember that you need to keep the human in the loop. AI is a non-deterministic technology, meaning that you can't exactly say what it's going to do from one session to another. So the real outputs need to be monitored by humans that actually do think and feel and reason, because they might need to correct or cancel it. So, I should be clear. To some, I might sound like an AI skeptic. I am not. I am a person who uses AI literally every day. I play with it. I love playing with it. I love learning it. I have built my own things in AI. And there are many, many uses that we have for AI. And it's obvious that there are many places where it is already adding value. And you're going to hear about some of that today. But I want to just reiterate my main point. There's a lot of hype out there. But as you listen to the folks that you're hearing from today, remember that AI is a normal technology. It is not completely different than anything that you guys have dealt with before. All right, so let's get started with our first topic. We like to say that every company is a media company, so we're going to start on purpose with an example of an AI company, of AI use by a company that's not specifically in the media industry. So I want to hand it over to my colleague, Will Rochefort, who's going to guide us through a discussion on enterprise uses of practical AI beyond media. Thank you. And we'll give him a few seconds to get up on stage.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Enterprise Lessons Beyond Media. I feel like I should explain why I'm in this boot. I ruptured my Achilles recently. It was torn clean through, which I could tell by the nonverbals. At least one person here has done this. I will tell you I did it while I was skiing in Italy, which means your sympathy is now gone down dramatically. I lead our B2B agency at Deloitte Digital. Great to meet you all. Miss Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Green. I run communications at DocuSign. That includes everything from internal, external. You can think of me as a PR person, content marketing. Some of you are going to care about that. And we also run the social channels.
Hey everyone, I am Rohan from Deloitte, and I build and launch AI products. And I promise I've been doing it for more than the last 2 years.
It's true. These are topics that we will or will not discuss, depending on where this conversation goes. But before we get into them, Erin, I need you to get a sense of who's in the audience.
That's right, I do. And the reason I want to do that is I think that AI is a really personal journey for people. What their adoption is like really depends on their interest, their curiosity level, how much opportunity they have at work. So I just want to ask a couple of questions of the audience here. I know everybody's used AI in some way because we all search Google. So everybody's seen, by show of hands, AI answers summaries at the top of Google. Yes? That's pretty much everybody. Okay, good. So next step and level of sophistication, I think, is have you replaced any of your workflow for the work that you do with some kind of AI in that process? Do we have show of hands there? Okay, so we've gone down by about half. Okay, and then we're going to see how many people are really in it. Anybody bought a machine so they can do OpenClaw and create their own assistant at home, spend a weekend doing that? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, cool. For those folks, hopefully you made note of those people at the end. They're really advanced. Apologies, guys. We're going to focus on the first 2 buckets, I think, for this one.
Yeah, definitely. So, Erin, you're leading a team of content professionals. When you're talking with them, how do you get them to buy into the excitement of AI and to use it while also balancing the importance of retaining their craft?
Yeah, I think for us, we are people who have been resource constrained, and so we think about all of the stuff that we wanted to do that we haven't been able to do on our own because there just weren't enough hours in the day, and so we're really looking for those things first. But we put guidelines around it. There's guardrails, and so I tell the team, you know, we're not going to export our core competencies, and I think of those things as judgment. We're not going to let Claude tell us what a good decision is. We're not going to export critical thinking. We bring back the old internet rule, which is just because the internet said it doesn't mean it's true. So same thing, just because ChatGPT said something doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean it's a good idea. So we're not going to export that. And then personal to me is humor, right? Like my observations are probably going to create a better joke than whatever's happening with an LLM. And so we put up those guardrails for the team, but then we look at the use cases of the things that we need where it was just like we're kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So I'll use the PR work as an example. We'll still write the first draft of the messages. That's not something that we can get because we're doing something new. And so there has to be a human who has to put thought behind that. But then when we need to atomize that content and put it everywhere else, whether it is a press release or if we need to write something for an executive, if we need to do some kind of internal post, something like that, we have created bots for all of those. A lot of Gemini gems for us because we're a Google house. And that way we can take what the humans created, run it through the AI sausage machine, and get to the results of first drafts of those a lot faster than we would have another way.
So we have a saying on our team, every company is a media company, which John Footen already took that line. I think I owe him $20 every time I say it. From your perspective, like being in DocuSign, not traditionally a media company, how do you think about the way that you make media like what you just described and how to make sure it persists with relevance for your internal and external audiences? Like more simply put, how are you guys making content that's actually worth watching in a role that hasn't been traditionally thought of as, oh, you're a media company making media content for consumers?
Yeah, well, note the subject matter that, you know, isn't normally the most entertaining thing, right? We're working with contracts, and so that's not a place that most people go to social media for. But well, let's talk about social as an example. Because in social, you know, you've got the thing our friends at Facebook, now Meta, would tell you got to stop the thumb, right? People are scrolling, you got to get them to stop. And you got to get them to stop every 3 seconds and get their attention every 3 seconds, or it's a lost cause and the algorithm's going to punish you, and then you're not relevant anymore, and then you can't meet your business goals. So for us, what we've tried to do is we tried to find the humor in the work that we do. So we've been recently, if you check Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, you will see a video from, I don't know if anybody knows these folks, Corporate Bro and Corporate Natalie on those platforms. They are influencers, humorists that we had, you know, do almost like a skit where one is a lawyer, one is a salesperson, and anybody who has worked with those two departments know that those two departments kind of don't like each other a lot. And sometimes they're at odds where one's slowing down the other, and then the other one is thinking, why are you bothering me? And so ended up doing content that was about contracts and was about DocuSign's platform and how it could help those folks. But because it was funny and because it was recognizing the humanity of the moment of those two groups trying to work together, the thing actually went viral. And for those who don't know, there are actually industry standards on that, which is typically going past what the size of the original audience's size was. Our videos ended up doing like 4 and 5 times what that was. And again, on contracts, most people typically aren't going to be like, ooh, contract content. But on this, because we tapped into the humanity and because we made it funny, it still got the point across and everybody understood what we were doing.
So this next question will be for both of you. I'll ask Aaron first, but Rohan to prep. So that's great. Big contract making humorous content. Wonderful. You're in the entertainment industry. How are you all using AI to keep up with this inexorable demand to make more and more content? Because your teams aren't expanding, but the pressure to make more and make more interesting is tough to keep up with. Is AI helping you cover that gap?
It is. It's definitely, for the resources that we didn't have, it is making up for that. But I think there's a little bit of change management that I would encourage the managers and the people who have organizations in this audience to think about. Is, you know, I was just talking to a friend who's a longtime NBC producer, and we were, you know, talking about this, and I wanted to make sure what we were talking about was going to be relevant. And she was like, honestly, I haven't dabbled that much. And I said, well, why not? Like, you kind of have to, right? And she was like, honestly, Aaron, I don't have time. Because she's doing so many different jobs at the moment. And so that would be my call to you all who are running teams and organizations, is you have to find time to carve out where they can dabble and they can play and they can figure out where their workflow can change, so that way you can get more of the productivity. Because if you don't carve out time for that, they're never going to be able to do it on their own, you know, unless they're taken away from home time if they ever had any to begin with.
Yeah. So Rohan, you've been doing AI for longer than 2 years. I know this is true. What is your perspective on how AI is helping cover that gap of the demand on enterprises to make more and more with the same number of humans doing the making?
Yeah, the thing is that I think you kind of touched on it really well, Aaron. You know, you said something like akin to getting people to actually use it for things they don't want to do. So, for example, in our industry, a lot of people are creating stuff, and we want to preserve the humanity in that creation. But there's an element after that around curation, which is like taking that and either putting it into new formats, into new languages, and distributing it through new channels. That's stuff that is not the creative work. It's the work that actually comes after creativity. And that's where AI can start to lift the organization and give you the bandwidth that you otherwise don't have. And so the goal here is to actually let people cook, let them do what they love doing, and let AI do everything else. And I think we have to find out what that is for each individual, for each role, and that's the hard work, the change management. But once you grok that, it's actually a huge uplift for the organization.
I got to add one more on that. You're talking about finding the joy, finding the thing you love. I would also, for the people who are dragging their feet on AI adoption, ask them to pinpoint the thing in their day that they hate, that they want to kill, and tell them, go get rid of it with AI, right? Go have AI do this thing that you hated doing, and they suddenly see the light.
Very sound advice. I won't ask what that thing was on your list. So, Rohan, for implementing AI, everyone wants to do it. They're very excited about it, but they really have trouble measuring success or knowing when they've done it to a degree they can be proud of. How do you think about measuring success when it comes to implementing AI?
I think if you ask any executive, if you ask any executive, all they want to do is cut costs, grow revenue, maybe, look at productivity measurements. And that's true, that's the outcome of AI. But you have to make your way there. So you have to think about what are the early indicators that tell you that you're going to be on that productivity or cost cutting or revenue growth journey. And it starts with, I think, first, awareness. Do people in your organization know that AI is available to them? Do they know what tools to go to? Do they know why to go to that tool? Then I think it's typically from there, it's like adoption. And once they know what exists, are they using it? And if they aren't, why not? Try to figure out why it is they aren't using it. But ideally, you want people to get to a place where they're using AI every day for as many things as possible. And then it's usage. Are they coming back? This is kind of back to the social media days where you're measuring monthly active users, daily, weekly active users. Are people coming back, and are they trying to do different things with your tool? And when you get that, everything else will flow downstream from that. So productivity, cost, revenue, whatever it is you're ultimately seeking will come when you start to measure these things. It's like in chess, you can't check the king in one move. You got to move your pawns, and these are the pawns with AI.
All right, this next question, I will go ahead and admit, is going to feel like a bit of a setup given who we have on stage. But tell us something you're excited about AI that feels unexpected to folks. This is a thing you can go implement and do, and it feels like it's going to be a storyline that isn't something that we read every single day in whatever news gets fed to us. And I will admit, as someone who lives in this space, with the way you both answered this question, I was like, oh my God, why have I not thought of that? So if you retain one thing from this conversation, this next of, oh, this is a way I could actually use AI that makes a difference and can make me feel like a hero, this is the answer to that question. So Rohan, please, tell the folks here what you talked to me about.
So I'm pretty certain, given where we are, you're probably hearing a ton of use cases around media and broadcasting, and I'm sure they're great. But I find that with a lot of the most useful AI use cases, it's a tongue twister, are sitting under your noses the whole time. And the reason Will set us up is because we actually did some research around this and found that contract management, believe it or not, is one of those places where you can actually get a lot of leverage from AI. It's something that every function uses: sales, legal, procurement, marketing. I sign contracts all the time as well in my role. And it's just something that connects various parts of the organization. And there's an untapped opportunity over there. It's not because it doesn't exist, it's because people don't think about it enough. And so we set out to prove that there is value over here. It turns out there's a lot of value. So Erin, do you want to add a couple of things there?
Yeah, I think if all of you work for companies where there's somebody at a high level C-suite person who's looking for some kind of AI adoption and looking for something that's actually going to have a meaningful ROI, what Rohan has found is that when you are adopting some kind of contract management platform, that there is, a nearly 30% increase in ROI because of the contract management. And so again, it's not the sexy stuff that I think most people are talking about at dinner parties, but it's also the thing that is super impactful and will actually save time, money, resources. And in the case of the stuff I was talking about, there are various functions whose days are going to get a whole lot better because they've, there's programs and platforms that are going to make their lives easier.
Unsexy AI. That's where it is.
Yeah, but the list, when you ask the question, what's the thing you least likely want to be doing during the day, it is literally dealing with the contracts, not the act of actually making content. So this is my answer to your question, which I appreciate immensely. All right, we have a couple of minutes. I want to get some closing thoughts here. So, Miss Erin, if we were to make a T-shirt that a human could walk around in Vegas wearing that had your hot take on what AI is and how to think about it, what would that T-shirt say?
Yeah, I think about the people who are really nervous about AI, and I want to give them some comfort and just remind them, I'll borrow a Gen Z slang for this. AI is just reheating somebody else's nachos. somebody's still got to make a tortillas, right? So as long as you still have an original idea and you still can make the tortillas, like, you will have a place.
Magnificent. Rohan, are you going to add one? Go right ahead.
Well, I think I'm just going to repeat a couple of things I already said, but I think I can't beat that. So here comes a boring one. But I think it's about curation, not creation. AI is not here to create. AI is an accelerator. And I think that's what I would tell everyone at this venue, at least. If I was wearing a T-shirt at NAB, it would say that, like, curate, not create. So that's my advice.
All right. Magnificent. Well, thank you all. It was lovely to share the stage with you. I appreciate it immensely. I next am going to introduce two more incredible humans, Abel and Jason, who I will stall for 60 seconds until they walk up. Oh, excellent. God, that was beautifully cued. Thank you all very, very much. It was lovely to spend some afternoon time with you. Abel and Jason, you're up.
All right, nice to see everyone. Just a show of hands, just when you think about AI and jobs, like your jobs, how many of you are excited by AI? All right, okay, not bad. How many of you are scared or concerned or anxious about AI? Okay, all right. So look, we want to spend the next few minutes just kind of talking about the intersection of humans and AI and the workforce. And I kind of want to start by naming, based on the show of hands, is a lot of you are probably wondering whether you're excited or anxious. Like, what does AI mean for me, for my role, for my team? And both of us want to be real with you, right? That anxiety, that excitement is real. It's rational. You're not overreacting. But I think here's what I believe, right? A lot of that fear or concern or anxiety isn't about the technology. It's about how we as leaders, as companies, have handled the AI rollout, right? We roll out these tools, we give them licenses, we talk a lot about transformations, and we forget that to bring the people that's most affected, people like all of you, into the process early enough to actually matter. And at Deloitte, we sort of call that the culture debt. And in our 2026 Global Human Capital Trends Report, puts a number on it. 42% of workers that we surveyed said organizations rarely evaluate AI's impact on people at all. Only 6% say they're actually making progress in designing how humans and AI work together. And meanwhile, 65% of organizations believe that culture needs to fundamentally change because of AI, right? And most aren't doing the work to get there. That gap between what leaders are deploying and how workers are experiencing it, it's that culture debt. And it's eroding trust at sort of the moment where we need it the most. So the real question isn't how AI will change your work. I think the question is whether you get a seat at the table as that redesign happens. And so I kind of want to bring my colleague here, Jason, because that's what we're going to be talking about. What it looks like to actually do this right, and what it means for your growth, your skills, your development, your future. And Jason here spends a ton of time working with media and entertainment clients. He leads Deloitte's AI initiatives, specifically within our media entertainment clients. So I would love Jason to sort of share his perspective on the conversations and the work that he's doing with the clients.
Yeah, thanks, Abel. Really excited to be here with you. And I think you said something earlier that's really important, and key is the seat at the table. Because one thing that we've observed, not just with AI, the experimentation and the adoption of AI within media processes, it's very similar to past technology transformations that we've seen. I would make comments that media engineers, whether in broadcast, filmed entertainment, et cetera, initially, at one time, were plugging cables, and then the shift went to plugging APIs, just kind of as the data-centric shift happened, cloud migration. More of the physical hardware became, broke out from boxes and became software. And a lot of what that really brought with it was the demand for a new set of foundational skills that we were asking our workforce to develop and then start to implement. And in many cases, that was a significant effort on their part. It was a significant shift. There was a lot of excitement in the investment and opportunity that media companies were making. But at the same time, I think we really have to acknowledge that there needs to be a lot of conversation, but also a lot of I think the really asking for the involvement of individuals that are responsible for these processes and workflows today. Individuals who have really been driving, whether it's creative, media supply chain, operations, monitoring, et cetera, and kind of, for one, show them what the future is going to look like within the context of the work they do with AI at their side. And a handful, another quick observation, and then I'll pass it back, is that the initial, I would say the initial vibe around AI was one of excitement. I will concede, like, AI around recognition, image recognition, around translation, around even applications of data, has been around in media for some time. I mean, I was deploying what was arguably AI applications in the early 2010s within the media supply chain for various metadata and media supply chain applications. But what was really I think a breakthrough moment was generative AI, and essentially kind of the output from these models that looked for the first time to be very similar to creative work. It wasn't necessarily, just around efficiency of management, annotation, et cetera, et cetera. It was really something that looked a lot like the work that professionals were doing within the creative space, within the media supply chain. And with all of the projects we've been delivering, we've seen the most success when, after the enterprises have figured out their governance, after they've started to identify priority workflows and essentially the direction they want to go, start to invite your workforce into those conversations so that they can, you're going to be in a better position for it. They know those processes and workflows better than anybody, and where AI can be deployed in a cost-effective, a highly accurate way, I mean, kind of whatever your milestones are, those are going to be the people who are going to get you there, as opposed to trying to drive it from a top-down perspective. Ultimately, that has just a degree of uncertainty that if you bring your workforce along for the journey, you can really help avoid some of those missteps.
Are there certain things that have to be true in order for that to happen? Because what I've seen is, a lot of companies are rolling out AI, but it feels like they're doing it to the workforce versus doing it with them. Like, if you were coaching an executive, a decision maker on AI, like, what needs to be true for them to do in order for what you say to actually happen?
Yeah, and you make an important point. Is like there definitely is the sense in some cases that this is being kind of deployed despite or imposed, in some instances. Now, all of that said, I mean, look, we understanding your governance and understanding responsible use of for AI and ensuring that your workforce has the proper training is critical. So I'm not suggesting just the Wild West. I don't think that's a recipe for success either. And also, our experience and observation is that's not a recipe for success. However, the governance conversations, a lot of the capability and use case conversations, and that kind of upstream strategic analysis has been performed in many cases. And once you have that bucket of, okay, we understand that the following use cases have a high probability of being kind of successfully augmented with AI, start to invite those individuals into environments where they have sandboxes, where they have access to the tools that you're working with, where they can kind of start to experiment with them, understand the tools, understand how their existing talents and skills and capabilities work in concert with the tools, and also just understanding the limitations and providing the feedback on kind of how ultimately to effectively deploy the technologies. And that's really where we've seen the success. It also diffuses a bit of the concern in many cases around the technology. I won't say in all cases, but there certainly are instances where the exposure and understanding, and also frankly leadership support, just helps with a lot of that anxiety.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I would add to that is, I feel like when we had this conversation last year, everyone was rolling out use cases, pilots, proofs of concept, and there wasn't a lot of appetite to focus on the work that really matters, the governance, the ethical and responsible use, understanding how your workforce and the people within it interact with AI, and those things are actually more important than I think people would like to admit, and I'm sensing and I'm seeing that a lot more companies are now investing more time. Like those don't make the flashy headlines, but they matter, and they will ultimately make some of those use cases ultimately more successful. And the other thing is with leaders, right? The one gap I have noticed is when leaders make mandates around AI, and then I have conversations with them, a lot of them don't actually use AI. And so how do you encourage your workforce to go more into AI when your leaders aren't doing it? So the other thing that we've been working on a lot, and I think it's important, is like getting leaders to be more visible, not just to talk about how AI should drive a company forward, but then them in their personal, in their work, how they're using it as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to riff on that because I love what you said about not only the use of it, but also just the messaging, because in the absence of messaging around what the intentions are, what essentially the strategic vision, the intention, and the progression of AI deployment, without that messaging, we're all being bombarded with messaging about AI right now, and a lot of that messaging, it's easy to see how that can drive anxiety. So I think it's very important to not only mentioned earlier bringing your workforce into the conversation, but also just make sure you're having that conversation, because if not, the headlines are not very comforting in some cases. So I think it is very I think that somewhere between complete transparency with just some structured conversation on what the plan is helpful.
And I think we have to move the conversation along from AI being an efficiency play, right? Faster, leaner, get more productive, and I think that's all true, but that's not where the real value is. I think the companies that win with AI are going to look at it as more of an opportunity technology, right? Reimagine people's work and jobs, that you could do more with more, right? If you read the headlines today, its efficiency is a big play, and I think that's fine. We're going through that phase, but I think the real value of AI is really going to be how you use AI to expand what you're able to do today that you couldn't before, and I think we're going to see that transition over time. It's going to take time, right? Change is hard, change is constant, and I think this is It's definitely different change, but it's no different than a lot of the other changes that I think the industry has faced in the past. Let me close it out by asking, like, if you were an individual contributor or a manager working, with one of these companies that's out there on the show floor, like, what is the one piece of tangible advice that you would give to them, when they go back to their work around AI and how to potentially do it better with their people?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of make this a little more of a comprehensive piece of advice, because we've already discussed just the value of bringing your talent and your professionals along as you're developing the use cases, as you're testing the tools, and as you're starting to do proofs of tech and I'll say more robust deployments. One key piece of experience is I like the phrase that AI is a symphony, not a solo act. And for individuals, and I heard in with the prior group that there's a number of individuals in the crowd who are experimenting with with agents, with different AI models, and not just large language models, but diffusion-based models, and kind of other models that might be more kind of specifically oriented toward video, image, sound, etc. The cohesive, coherent, robust, reliable deployment of those technologies can be very challenging, especially at scale. So we've worked with a number of organizations on essentially kind of the initial proofs of tech to validate the accuracy, even kind of the cost dynamics of different point AI solutions. But ultimately, integrating a point AI solution is likely not going to deliver the value that the use case was originally targeting. It's going to be there's quite a bit of cross integration, orchestration, and complexity with a lot of these end-to-end solutions. So those are other areas where your workforce is going to have unique insights into the variability that are going to really stress the corner cases as you're not only experimenting with the technology, because kind of having too much of a bullseye with your proof of tech may not indicate some of the fragility of that solution in the end. But at the same time, as you're graduating that proof of technology to your into shadow production or ultimately into production, you're really going to start to run into just some of the scalability and other, frankly, challenges that deploying any new complex solution in an environment as complicated as media and entertainment with the kinds of essentially kind of data, media, metadata, et cetera, that it ends up taking it from an experiment into something that's production ready and really driving business value tends to be a pretty big lift that often has a lot less to do with AI. So the recommendation is really just kind of be prepared for that, as you're not only planning for which use cases to implement with AI, but also doing those production deployments. Kind of prepare for that that level of effort as you're building your solution. So
yeah, well, and just I think we're both betting that a human team that works alongside agents will always outperform a team that is replaced by agents. We'll see if that holds true, but I'm pretty sure it will.
Yeah, very
Thanks,
good.
Jason.
Excellent. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring up my colleague Nicole to continue the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a great show.
Welcome everybody. We're going to over deliver because I brought some friends with me. Jason and Abel, we're going to continue the conversation that they were having and actually talk a little bit more about how real AI or AI is coming to life in the broadcast world. And so I brought two friends with me here. We have Ernie Ensign from Sinclair Broadcast, and then Art Wong from the Deloitte TMT Solutions team. And we're going to talk about some real life examples today. Like John said last year, there was a lot of conceptual conversation, and I feel like we're in a space where we can talk about real examples. So Ernie, I'm going to start with you. And my question is going to go straight to, what are some of the really specific use cases that sort of give you the signals, or not the use cases, but what are the signals when you're implementing a use case when you know this is more than just sort of a proof of concept? And then when you're thinking about that, what are some of the fastest ways to sort of pressure test it so with live data versus a test environment so to keep going?
Yeah, I think it really starts with measurement. You're going to go into a new use case. You're going to test something. You want to make sure that you can, have identifiable outcomes and make sure that we're measuring against those, whether it's time savings, whether it's speed to distribution. Did you initially accomplish all of those goals, and can you measure it? I think that's the first sign. I think the next one is natural adoption. You know, we are potentially changing workflows for users who have operated in a certain way for decades. And do they naturally gravitate towards a solution without coercion, being voluntold? This is the way. And I think a great example of that, you know, and it's somewhat low-hanging fruit, is transcription. You know, you can show a user how quickly they can go and create a timeline by just, you know, grabbing sound bites off of a transcription, and they can't argue with that. You know, it's immediate and apparent what the potential, you know, benefit is of that. And, you know, lastly, I think it just has to easily integrate. We've been in a world for so long where we have 5, 6, 7 platforms, you know, for our content centers to operate and do their jobs. And it can't be, well, I've got to go over here and do this thing, I've got to go over here. And, you know, I think for pressure testing, it really comes down to making it real. If it is a side project for one of our content centers, they are going to be disinterested because it's just something else that they have to be focusing on or be disrupted by. So yes, we do a little bit of testing, but I think initially you have to put it in front of them, you have to make it part of their daily workflows, and then that's when you get back to the measurement. Did we measure up?
Yeah, and we've definitely done some skunk works, you know, examples in some of the stations, but now, you know, rubber meeting the road. You highlight a few, you know, examples of measuring real benefits. Every AI use case that we're putting in, we're making sure that we're measuring real benefits, right? You highlighted time savings, speed to distribution. I mean, also the ones that Rohan mentioned earlier of, yes, we're looking at the ones that executives are eyeing of cost efficiencies, revenue uplifts, but, you know, we're also looking at risk reduction too. You know, we're doing compliance scanning. So it's not just a return on investment, we're looking at returns on investment that can be manifested in different ways.
Yep. And measuring is hard sometimes. You know, you're going in and saying, well, the previous workflow, they did A, B, and C, now they're doing X. You know, how do you actually derive that value and determine, you know, was it 8 minutes that they saved? Was it 25 minutes that they saved? So sometimes those measurements are difficult, and sometimes you have to, you know, make a leap of faith and create estimates.
So, Art, I'm going to come to you for this one. And it's a topic that I think almost immediately hit the table when we started talking about using artificial intelligence in our work in the media world, especially in broadcasting, and you work with broadcasters like Ernie. There are so many high stakes moments, things, you know, you're dealing with live so often. How do you think about using technology like AI or generative AI in those high stakes moments? And how do you think about the decision to automate versus keeping a human involved and really thinking about how you design governance to support that?
Well, I'll answer your question by starting with an example. Think about in a newsroom. This AI tool, if it hasn't already existed, will exist very shortly. But think about, you've got this AI tool that checks real-time police scanner and then generates news stories instantaneously based on stuff that's coming in through that police scanner. If you think about AI did it, it can very easily, you know, possibly misidentify the suspect. It will pull an address that forgets to identify that it's a school. And these are things that if a human gets entered in the loop right at the end, 60 seconds just checking that story, they will be able to add these things very quickly. So, you know, this idea of a human in the loop is super important, and it's not a question of, you know, are humans and AI going to coexist? It's a question of where we're going to be inserting humans into the process. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say never, but I mean, for automating any kind of, you know, content functionality, there always has to be a human in the loop. Somebody has to, you know, verify facts. You know, we still do journalism. You know, we have 65 content centers that pride themselves on journalism. AI assists, humans decide, you know, and we never simulate any type of events as we're, you know, doing some of our coverage. So if we don't have video that fills in a gap, we'll, you know, we don't use Gen AI to, you know, put those components in there. So there has to be, you know, governance around that, and that human always has to be in the loop.
I mean, journalistic integrity will never go away. You know, the skills that journalists learn in school of fact-checking, source-checking, they're still going to have to do that with AI.
Absolutely. We see AI outputs as drafts that, humans can come in and adapt and adjust, and they do every day because of different word choices and things along those lines. So,
and so when Rohan was out here a few minutes ago, he was talking about sort of his 3 steps, right? So you drive awareness and then adoption, and then you get people to sort of like experiment and integrate it into their workflow. Where have you seen in the broadcast world sort of the stickiness or adoption really stick in the work that you're doing, so that you can make sure that you're sort of truly driving adoption of new tools and technology, especially as it relates to AI?
We started, I think, with a lot of text-based use cases that I think everyone, has, experimented with. Obviously, script writing is a big one. And we still have silos where we have some journalists that, really are more traditional linear. We have more journalists that are more traditional digital. We're trying to bridge those gaps, but, a linear producer may not be as good as writing a web script, and so that's a perfect use case. Take my linear script, create the, 300 to 500 word AP web script, and vice versa. We have digital producers that don't do a lot of linear, so, take that web script and bring it over. Tease writing is a big one. Sometimes you're teasing a story 5, 6, 7 times within, a show, and, that ideation of some of that is a great one. I think we have a total of 15 different prompts that can be run that, from writing 5, 10, 15-second, promo type scripts that, can be validated. I think a surprise success actually has been accountability journalism. So whether it is take this 300-page report and give me 5 story ideas from it, or here's a story we did on, some government waste. What are the unanswered questions for this story, or what are those, next steps that we need to take that story so that, we are the voice of our viewers. Obviously, metadata enrichment, scene recognition, facial detection. We talked about transcription. That's been a big one. Auto-tagging content. So if we're doing, social posts and things like that, it's already putting various tags in there. And just, thinking about the script writing a little bit, a lot of our users, I don't think, yes, you're always going to have users who are a little fearful of new technology, but I think they don't think that the AI script writing isn't going to create, the right outputs. I think their fear, we've had journalists who, that's their craft. They feel like they're creating something, and now when you bring in another tool, they feel devalued a little bit because, well, what's my role in this if I'm only an approver of content? So we're trying to work with them more to, make it a partnership as opposed to, well, AI does this, and now, you're subjugated to a lesser role. So, but the conversations continue.
Yeah. That accountability journalism example that you talked about, sifting through that 300-page report, you can prompt, an agent to ask,
Yep.
What doesn't pass the sniff test here, right? And that saves so much time. And that's not reducing,
Yep.
The role of a journalist itself. So.
Yep.
Well, and art, it sort of takes the task out of the process, right? So it breaks your role down into like smaller piece parts. So you can think about it as terms of like at the task level. You're not taking the whole role away. You're just thinking about a part of it, right?
Well, and there's, that's a massive amount of time savings to sift through a 300-page report, probably one of the areas where we do not get a lot of value, and we should, is, we probably shoot with 65 content centers. They go out and do a story on a topic. They probably shoot 45 minutes of video. We use 1.5 minutes on air. We try to pull some other pieces of raw content and publish those to other mechanisms, but we probably use 5% of our content. It's a perfect use case for AI to analyze that and surface the best nuggets of content that You know, the journalists have created that have value that viewers want to see. That makes it easier. You know, obviously we're getting into, you know, auto formatting content and creating multiple aspect ratios and really trying to focus in on the content and not just say, we're going to take a 16:9 and we're just going to crop it. You know, really trying to elegantly stack, you know, the real estate in vertical. So lots more to come with, you know, video-driven workflows.
And so I know we're going to run close on time here, but I'm curious to hear, as you're working with some of these new tools and technology, how do you approach scaling responsibly? There's a lot of discussion about proof of concepts and testing, but when you take something from pilot to enterprise level integration, and you're thinking about standardizing, you know, whether the data or the governance, what are some of the things that you consider, and what trade-offs maybe have you made around scaling responsibly?
I think it's really looking at how do we standardize where it really matters. You know, I mean, we are moving into a world where, you know, we are going to be centralized. Today, we are 65 islands of technology that doesn't make it real easy for all of them to collaborate. And, you know, we're all going to have to play in the same sandbox with the same rules. You know, throwing sand is not allowed, and, you know, you have to follow the rules so that if you want to share content from multiple markets, you know, and easily drag a script and an asset from market A to market B, it has to be standardized. And I think the trade-off here is that stations don't like that they're losing their autonomy. And, you know, it becomes conversations to making sure that they buy in on the why. Because, again, and there's going to be areas where they will have some flexibility, but, you know, rundown templates and the way that everything is structured, metadata schemas and ontologies, you know, that all has to be consistent, or things are going to break, or it's going to cause confusion because station A is doing something one way. And I think it creates a problem because obviously what you want to happen with new technology is there may be an idea that we as technologists and engineers haven't thought of, and if they have the ability to go and play with the tools, they might uncover an amazing time savings or another AI use case. And if you don't give them some leeway to do that, you know, you shut them down.
Yeah.
So,
well, to Jason's point, invite your workforce into the conversation, right?
Yep.
Establish your guardrails. Yeah.
It's a balance, you know. There's going to be areas where we just have to standardize and we have to communicate like, hey, I hear you, but this is the way it's going to have to happen because we all have to play by the same rules.
You mentioned, Ernie, earlier around the idea that we've created 15 curated prompts that all the stations can use, and I think that's a really good example of how we're scaling. You know, in the very beginning, it's the wild, wild west of, you know, run whatever prompt you want, and then you get the output. But we've identified, I think, a set of 15 curated prompts where it yields standardized outputs across the stations at scale, you know?
Yeah, all of our users have access to ChatGPT. From an enterprise standpoint, I think the problem with some of that is exactly that you can create your own prompt, and does it really create the intended output? So we've now created a mechanism where we are sort of forcing the prompts so you get the right value of who you're trying to, you know, target from those particular prompts. So.
Great discussion. I'm going to I'll give you your leave and invite my friend John Footen back on stage so that we can wrap up our conversation today. But thank you both for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
So, thank you,
Stand.
Nicole. I just want to say something real quick about what Ernie said. When you talk about scaling, it's really important to remember, like I said at the beginning, this is normal technology. It has all the same characteristics as what you're used to. It's very important that you get that infrastructure right and that data plane right, and all of the fundamentals of technology correct, and that's what enables scaling. And then, Nicole, do you want to comment a little bit about that from a people perspective?
For sure. So I think, and I'm going to sort of bring a couple thoughts of things that we heard on the stage today as well. But when we talk about scaling and scaling responsibly, one of the things that I hear over and over is that you have to find the processes that can scale, right? Don't look for those niche things that are cool and interesting because it's sort of a fun story you can tell at a cocktail party, right? So think about those processes that you do over and over already in your business. And I would also say take it down to the atomic level, like we were just talking about. Think about a task and not necessarily try to replace an entire process or an entire role, and start to think about it at sort of a smaller level, and then you can build from there.
So as we close this out, I just want to say that AI is going to be a part of your life. As I said at the beginning, it has been a part of your life. It is a very useful technology, but it is a computer program. You have to approach it intelligently, just like you do any other technology, and you have to point at the right problems. The actual intelligence is yours. So thank you all. Have a great show.
Thanks, everybody.